Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Physical Therapy Private Practice Secrets of the Top 10%. My name's Brian Gallagher. I'm your host. And this week we do have a guest on our show, and I can't wait to introduce John. I'm going to let him pronounce his last name. He has got a wonderful practice in a very difficult environment in our nation, but he is slinging it. He is dragon slaying every single week and every single month and succeeding. And I just think that adds so much value to this podcast and to all of you as listeners to hear that you can persevere, you can succeed. He has written a book to actually lay out how he has rolled out his success. So with a proven track record of success, proof in the pudding, that is what I'm most interested in. Nobody wants to be sold today. We all want to know how we can physically, emotionally, and professionally enhance ourselves. So my guest is John. John, please introduce yourself, and thank you for making time to come on this podcast. I hope we can have a wonderful conversational exchange and bring some great value to the listeners today.
Ryan, thank you so much. John Gallucci here, the president and CEO of JAG Physical Therapy, and very excited to be with you today, Brian.
That's fantastic. And we've had some conversations leading into this podcast. For a lot of you guys, one of the things I wanted to shoot a podcast on, and I probably will in the upcoming weeks, is each and every time somebody reaches into Meg Business Management, whether they need billing help, front desk help, Meg Academy, how to be a better CEO, how to put in structure, I could just go on and on about these types of things, but I got the idea that I should read on a podcast and answer the statement that every single owner writes when they lead into us, and they lead in and they fill out a little form and they say, this is what I'm having trouble with. So John, I've been reading some of these. I mean, they come in every week, and I want to hear how we can have a conversation today for everybody listening. And let's touch on the challenges of academia, the good and the bad, because there's both, the challenges of meeting the expectations of new grads in a very, let's face it, challenging environment that has low reimbursement for in-network. And obviously there's hybrid models, and we're going to talk about that. And let's talk about how success is directly pinned to the age-old mantra of good old hard work and working smarter, not always harder. But there is a combination of being that willingness to be tough and work hard, but also work smart. So I'd love to open it up to, we're all trying to fill the need of the 20,000 chairs that are open every single week in physical therapy that go unfilled. And a lot of that waits on academia. You and I were talking about how academia in some ways puts fixed ideas in people's heads that makes it harder for us to fill these 20,000 chairs. But yet at the same time, I feel like we're getting some really good quality clinicians out of therapy schools in America, as opposed to what we had in the past. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the new grad and how it relates to academia. What are you seeing, John? What is your opinion? What is your thoughts? I mean, you have a lot of experience in hiring new grads. Tell me a little bit about that. But before you do, give us the background of JAG Physical Therapy, when you started, how you got to where you are today, and then let's take up this topic.
So JAG Physical Therapy started all the way back in 2004. As I stated privately with you, I was the head athletic trainer and director of healthcare for the New York Red Bulls, and we were training out of Giant Stadium, and I was seeing private patients in the locker room after the team had left, and popularity began, and all of a sudden we needed to go find our own office. Went and rented 1,800 square feet in West Orange, New Jersey. That's now our flagship office for the entire company. It sits at 11,000 square feet. We're very proud that we're still in that building and still in that community, and very proud that that's where we have grown the business out of. As you guys could kind of figure out, JAG is John Anthony Gallucci. That's me. So I am a guy that believes in keeping it simple. I am a Kiss fan, a rock and roll band, and I always wondered where the name came from. And if you think about it, keep it simple, silly, or stupid, depending upon who you are. So I had a company that I worked with in pro sports that wanted to name the company for me. They gave me 30 different names, and I hated every one of them because there was no touch to me, to the brand, to the organization, and I had so much experience and so much opportunity that my wife was filling out the legal papers. John Anthony Gallucci was on the top, and I said, how about JAG Physical Therapy? And she thought it was great. I thought it was great. And here we are close to 21 years later and very excited. So we started, as I said, one clinic in New Jersey, and we're a student of healthcare. I am, and I was watching the evolution of success. And one of the biggest things are mentoring new grads, and we'll touch on academic in a minute. But I noticed I was mentoring new grads, and after a year or 2 years, they wanted more. Might be with you, or it might be to go somewhere else, but they wanted more. And the way we figured it out was not only mentor them as clinicians, but mentor them in understanding the business and the business makeup. And some of us as owners fear that. But what we don't realize is if you're alone every day, you can't build. If you build a team with the same mindset and the same culture, that team means you're not alone and helps breed success internally. So your message gets duplicated and then tripled and then quadrupled. So we've been very lucky in that formula, and we built the company to 18 clinics, and then I had colleagues with 18 clinics, and we realized collaborating together that we would be more of a force in the demographics we were, and we came together. And since then, we've grown since 2018, and we sit at 150 facilities. We're the only company, which is odd for me, that touches all 5 boroughs of New York City. We touch Rockland County, Westchester County, Long Island. We're New Jersey, tip to tip, Montvale to Cape May, as I like to say. And we touch Philadelphia and Bucks County. And we've been very fortunate because that simple concept of don't do it alone and build a culture of collaboration has helped us build the company with caregivers and physical therapists and occupational therapists and certified athletic trainers that collaborate each and every day for the success of our patients and their goals. But back to your original questions of academics, I think all of us have been affected by COVID, including the academic world. And we're all still shaking off the side effects of business, of academics as it was. And I think what's happened is when we look at the academic world is sometimes they're not keeping up with the industry. And I think there needs to be better collaboration. And I think the APTA executive director is doing a great job, Justin Moore, on trying to bring clinicians that are out in practice and bring the academics together to collaborate on what do we want to see in a graduating physical therapist. And I think the APTA and here in New Jersey, the APTA NJ run by Daniel Klim is really trying to build that component of camaraderie. But the biggest obstacles we deal with is, you said we've got 22,000 open positions throughout the United States each and every day. But yet you can build and get a medical school in the United States accredited in 3 years, and it takes a physical therapy program in a college to get accredited close to 5 and sometimes even 6 years. So why are we double a medical school? The second big thing that's very concerning is we fought. I mean, if you go back to the, as I like to say, the founding fathers of physical therapy, the Art Nelsons, the Marilyn Moffats, the Andy McDonoughs, you go back to those people back then. I mean, Catherine McWilliams, you look at those people who I feel were the Roger Nelson, the so-called founding fathers of our profession in academics and treating patients. When you look at their goals were, we are a treating profession. We are a hands-on profession. And although everybody wants to implement this concept of technology, at the end of the day, patients want to be cared for by people. We are people treating people. And I think we've got to make sure that the academic institutions understand that. And bells or whistles are great to treat and teach, but ultimately not everybody can afford the bells and whistles. I know one of the subjects we'll talk about is how in a marketplace where our reimbursement is low, how do we afford to do our business? And part of it is efficiencies and making sure that the physical therapist is the tool, not the fancy treadmill, not the fancy laser, not the beep, beep, beeps, but the physical therapist is where the money should be spent. So that's my quick opening, and I'm willing to delve into anywhere I just jumped into.
No, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Your background, your history really is what creates an expert, right? I always consider a definition of an expert as one who's highly knowledgeable in a particular field, but has immense experience married to it. And when you have both of those together, you are an expert. And so it's really an honor to have you here as an expert in this whole history of physical therapy and what you've performed as a private practitioner. I will say I 1000% echo the need, the strong, unbelievable need to bring business leaders, successful business owners of physical therapy private practices and corporate to academia as guest lecturers, as featured speakers, as potential content writers, because to a certain degree, I think a lot of practice owners listening to this podcast will agree, I believe, that there's a bit of a disconnect between the set expectations of the new grad coming out matching the expectations that the owner has for a staff physical therapist hire. See, PT school does a wonderful job of education, duplication, application for a staff therapist. But unlike chiropractic school, where they're not only training you in the art and skills of chiropractic, they're also training you in the business model of how to apply those clinical skills in a business setting for making a living. A lot of people come out of PT school, we hire them, and they have no concept, no relationship to the fact that they're contributing, they're in part to contribute to their living, their livelihood. And the individual members of our businesses only win and succeed and achieve their goals, their vision, their ideal scene after the group is achieving its ideal scene. Wouldn't you agree that in some part that is a bit of a lift for a lot of us practice owners hiring new grads today, that we have to kind of change the set of expectations to be like, this isn't just about you and your staff schedule. This is about you participating, wearing the jersey with the rest of us.
That's an awesome point. And Brian, thank you for pointing that out. The biggest thing that you're saying is academically to take a didactic consumer exam, to pass the exam, and then to be a physical therapist is a far difference to truly treating the populace each and every day, being a team member in a company, at a clinic, being a team member each and every day for the betterment of the patients and for the betterment of the company. And I think, and I do a lecture, I go to about 14 to 16 colleges a year. I do a third-year lecture, what to expect after graduation, what to know when you start your first job. And I've been very fortunate, and I get feedback from students. I've been doing it for over 7 years. I'm still getting feedback that 2 hours I spent with them truly prepared them for the rest of their career, because all they really did learn is they did learn how to treat people. They learned systems. But as you said, there are different allied healthcare and healthcare fields that there is a business portion. There's an understanding of growth and development. There's a component of self-branding. Even if you're with a company, you have to self-brand. You might be under the JAG physical therapy brand, but the physicians and the community are coming to you to treat them. You're the physical therapist. It's your shingle. It's your provision of care that you're given each and every day. I think the academics are doing a great job based on the core curriculum, but I think where the schools are sort of failing is not preparing them for the workforce and not integrating them into the workforce. A perfect thing is, and in the last 5 years, we've all heard on interviews, I'm looking for a work-life balance. Everybody wants to use those words. I'm looking for a work-life balance. Well, I learned a long time ago, if you took 7 days and you took 24 hours, that's 168 hours. I'm only asking you to work 40. Maybe if you're an executive, you're going to work 50, but that's a pretty darn work-life balance. But you have students coming out of school saying, hey, I only want to treat Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 12 hours a day. Well, that's awesome. But the populace of the population doesn't want to come in at 8 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. They want to come in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We've got therapists that will tell us that, oh, I don't want to start seeing patients till noon. Well, what do we tell the patients that have to go to work at 7, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock? So ultimately, you've got to be part of this team when you come out. So when you're interviewing, understand, yes, you want to find a pathway of your personal success, your professional success, your financial success, which are the three things that JAG tries to do for all of their employees. But ultimately, you've got to understand that you've got to invest in those three things too. You can't go to an employer and ask for more, but want to work less. You can't go to an employer and say, I want more time off, but the productivity of when you're working, you're not meeting the team's expectations. And I think companies are getting more and more fair. I mean, heck, when it was in the 80s, there were a couple of companies that were churning and burning, which was horrible for our industry. I think we have done a much better job. I mean, in the outpatient world, the expectation is no more than 2 to 3 visits per hour, which is very handling, especially if you've got an educated physical therapy assistant with you, or you're working with a team of people. So we have exercise physiologists and certified athletic trainers that collaborate each and every day with the PTs and PTAs and OTs. But we should be able, in the outpatient musculoskeletal world, to be able to handle that type of volume. I remember in the 80s, there were clinics seeing 7, 8 patients. Now, that's just poor therapy in totality, and people were just churning. And think about it, you were getting paid $180 a visit. Now you're getting paid $95 a visit. So not only were you churning and burning, you were banging out the bucks. You know, our profession is one that, we've got to fight for ourselves. We all got to get down to Congress. We've got to fight for better reimbursement for the profession of physical therapy. But ultimately, as a student that's about to graduate, you just stepped out into your practice. You've invested into your education. You want to be known for being an unbelievable provider. But you have to understand, you can't walk in an interview and say, how many days off am I? What is my work-life balance? And, oh, yeah, I never want to write a note. Well, how do you expect us to ever get paid so we could pay you? So I think the academics need to do a better job to the student populace. And it's not the students' fault. It's the messaging that they're getting. And if we change that messaging on a collaborative component, I think the profession is going to take off. And remember, statistics show out of 100% of musculoskeletal injuries treated per year, physical therapists are only touching 10% of it. So the profession has such an opportunity to grow, and we've marketed ourselves. I mean, when we changed, do you remember Vision 2020? You're as old as I am. Vision 2020 was to not only bring our profession to a doctoring profession, but it was to let the American people know that we are the rehabilitative specialists. We are doctors of physical therapy. And yet we can't keep up with the demand. Shame on us. We need to get those 22,000 seats filled. We need to get the academic cohorts getting filled, but we also need to figure out something about costs. And I don't know if you want to have a whole other segment on that, but costs are absolutely ridiculous. You've got students graduating with $140,000 worth of loans, and ultimately coming out and making $80,000 to $90,000 in their first year out. Granted, they may have 30 years to pay the loan, but it's still, we've got to figure that out. So do we shrink down the doctoral program? I know a couple of our colleagues have talked about that. Should it be 3 years? Should it be 2.5 years? Do we figure out a clinical component that's paid? Imagine that. You're going to go to work and get paid while you're doing your clinic. We pay residents in hospitals. Why are physical therapists not being paid when they go? So this way they can offset the charges. That's one thing I'll never understand. Brian, maybe you can educate me. How is it possible that you pay an academic institution full tuition for an affiliation that they do nothing with for 8, 10, and 12 weeks, but the student has to pay for it? They don't get paid. We're doing all the work, and we get no money. So one day, Brian, you've got to educate me how that ever happened. And you should know, I yell at Marilyn Moffat all the time that she made that happen.
There's so much to unpack there. You hit on so many hot topics, and the ones I want to pick up on most importantly from what you just shared, and really give some tips for you guys listening for your success, is to understand that academia does a really good job setting you up for being a staff physical therapist, coming out, having the clinical skills, having your professional development to come in and start treating patients. What John and I are saying is that the job, the position, the profession, there's more that it encompasses than just that. It's all about an exchange in abundance, having an exchange in abundance relationship with your employer, knowing what the expectation is for you as a clinician to have a happy position there. And it goes back in my mind, John, what I would like to share, what people could walk away from what you just said is, what is the purpose for you going to PT school in the beginning? If I'm an employer today, or if I'm in academia, let's remind everybody why you went to PT school, because I've been asking this question for over a decade. And honestly, I've only gotten two answers and I've never gotten a third. And I'm open to, receiving a third answer, but it's always been, I went to school to acquire the knowledge, skills, and experience so that I can help as many people in my community achieve optimal health, number one. And number two, I want to acquire the level of expertise so that I can give the greatest value of care with each and every engagement. I should feel blessed and honored that this patient is in front of me for me to do the clinical evaluation with them, because I know full well there are 12 other clinics within 2 miles of this office that they could have been at, but they're choosing to be here. So how does that happen? How do you actually fulfill those two goals, those two purposes of being a staff physical therapist? You fulfill that by taking a job, taking a position with a practice that is going to encourage and support your professional development, your personal development, patient satisfaction, and the group has to be winning, as well as the owner of that group, who is the leader, who is fulfilling a vision for you to come through. Unfortunately, John, you touched on another bullet point that I would like to put out there as a tip for professional success. And that is, the only thing a new grad should be seeking when you look for that interview, like what to expect after graduation, I'm sure this is part of your lecture, is seek out opportunity. I don't owe you student loan. I'm not responsible to pay off. The average student now has $149,000 in student debt. Let's all agree that the colleges today, it's a racket as to how much they're charging. I mean, it's just, how can one industry go up 400% while the rest of us are not? So that pricing is a racket for sure. But when you come out of school and you look at John, or you look at me as I'm hiring you, and you look at us like it's our responsibility to unburden you from that. No, our responsibility is to give you opportunities to flourish and prosper in your income ability to earn a greater income, in your professional development ability to become a better clinician, in your practice, potential to move up the employment ladder into higher positions. John, that leads me to, you've obviously been successful at grasping that new grad, bringing them in as a staff therapist, and then, enabling them to grow up within your business, because obviously you've grown so beautifully. Give us a successful action on how you've been able to do that. Give us a successful action on why people, who take a position at JAG Physical Therapy, they look back a year later, 2 years later, and they say, you know what? This was one of the greatest decisions I ever made because blah.
It's a great question. And it was the academic institutions that pushed us to change our process from when we first opened to now. So years ago, when you hired a physical therapist, they were ready to treat. The academic institutions taught the physical therapist to treat. They came out, they were ready to see a populace of patients, and they were ready to learn the way your practice progressed and treated patients, but they already had a knowledge base. For some reason, that changed, where the academic world started to tell the students, you need to go work somewhere that's going to continue to educate you. And yes, it is a practice where medical professionals and we're practicing, but you have to understand that you're being paid to care for patients. And ultimately, what we've done to combat that concept of continuing your education in your practice is we built an awesome mentorship program right out of school. So when you're a first-year graduate and you come into JAG, you have a mentor that basically brings you in, you're onboarded, and then there's a process over 6 to 9 months, depending upon your speed and how you're getting things, that we work on a clinical component, we work on an EMR component. We educate on coding. We educate on communication with physicians and insurance companies. We educate on working collaboratively as a team. We work on understanding that it's your brand under our brand. We want the doctors, we want the patients to know you. It's not about everybody's going to be touched by John Gallucci. How can John Gallucci touch people in 150 facilities?
Yeah,
So
I want to just jump in there for everybody. Don't miss what John just said there. It's your brand as much as it is our brand. Your brand is nestled in under our bigger brand, our roof of branding. And what he's saying there is hold yourself to a higher level, higher regard as a professional that you are. You're not just here to get your hours. You're not here to exchange time for money. You're here to show us what you got. You're here to show us how many lives can you touch? How much better can the patients leave here and have a net promoter score of 9 or above and be like, I would never go anywhere else. And it's because of you. And John's saying, I've created an environment that you can be an intrapreneur within my entrepreneurial environment. John, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to emphasize that fact. When you come out of academia and people are telling you what to look for that.
Your concept of intrapreneur and entrepreneur is spot on. You're hitting the nail. The hammer's hitting the top of the nail unbelievably. We want people to build their practice. It's your practice. We might be doing it under one brand and one EIN for the collaborative effect of being able to negotiate contracts and purchasing power. But at the end of the day, I want the patients and the doctors to know Bob, Sally, Luann, Teresa, Margaret, Mike. I want them to know everybody because you're the treating therapist. You're the provider. And we've been so successful. And we've also created pathways, not just past the mentorship program, but when now you're a second year, a third year, a fourth year. What are your interests? Are your interests research? Are your interests to be working in sports? Are your interests to be going in an advanced clinical pathway? Is your interest to be going into management? So we've created different pathways, which has helped us with the retention and growth. And again, we try to push every day that, and if we fail, it's our fault, but we try to push that we're a company that's going to help you grow collaboratively with us personally, financially, and professionally. And it's got to be a two-way street. It can't just be an ask. It's got to be both ways because we don't know what you're thinking and we don't know what your goals are, but you could accomplish them with us. And that's why we've been so successful in our retention and the collaboration with our therapists.
I've got to say, John, it's like we're brothers. I mean, we've only been together a couple times on some Zooms, but I'm telling you, man, what I'm hearing you say is just so. I literally in Meg Academy have a lecture called the Two-Way Street Lecture. And I say my lecture, I got to send you this document. It's a handout. It's a one-page handout. And it has a picture of a house at the top, a picture of the clinic at the bottom. And it shows a U-Haul truck going to the house. And it shows a Toyota Camry going to the clinic. Because, every physical therapist drives a Honda Accord or Toyota Camry, right? I mean, that's conservative in nature. But the truck goes to your house and it dumps off a bucket of cash into your living room for the work that you're doing. And then you drive to work in the Camry. And so on the one side, I said, this is what is being exchanged with you from the organization to you. Cash, benefits, PTO, time off, health insurance, right? But what is it that you're doing in exchange for that? It's 85% clinically efficient, highly productive, giving a volume of care with each and every engagement, and we all know, for those of you listening, you can have great quality care seeing a patient come in every half hour, stay 55 to 65 minutes. You can have great care with patients coming in every 40 minutes, patients coming in every 45, and for a certain part of the country, still seeing a patient 1 an hour. I'm not a fan of that in other parts of the country, but yesterday I was talking to a person who had 8 offices. The average reimbursement was $135 a visit. They're not on a 3-week waiting list. Well, if you don't have a 3-week waiting list, you're making 135 visit. You can throttle down, do this but if you're nestled in, I'm just answering the question for those of you listening, like what's the difference, Brian, between the 1 an hour and seeing a patient every half hour coming in, 55 to 65 minutes. And I'm going to let John touch on this because this is how he's been successful in a very challenging environment, which is where we're going next with this. But I often tell people, if you're in a market, like let's say you've got a clinic outside of the University of Wisconsin, you have very low Medicare population, which doesn't even really matter to me, to be honest with you. But let's just say it does. It makes everybody else comfortable when you say that. Let's say it does. And you can create a pod approach, DPT1, DPT2, PTA, tech. John's done a really good job of having highly trained, highly experienced tech, not some high school kid being your tech, but somebody who went to school and is an athletic trainer, exercise science, physiologist, whatever. But you got green team, blue team, red team, because if you're outside the University of Wisconsin, you have a volume of people coming in. Now you can give one-on-one care for 38 minutes easy, and then they can go on to their program, their home program independently with some supervision, which you're not going to bill for, but they can also have some supervised modalities. But if you do take them back 5 minutes early, keep them 5 minutes late, use supervised modalities, use care extenders, do point of service documentation, and create pods, you can easily be compliant with all of the compliant regulations and still have patients coming in every 30 minutes, 55 to 65 minutes a session. John, I'm assuming you've just exploited that in a big way because you are in a highly populated, dense part of the country.
We're highly dense, but we're also the lowest reimbursement in the country.
Right.
So ultimately, is going back to our original part of the conversation, we are physical therapists. We sell physical therapy. We sell occupational therapy and athletic training as well. But our primary revenue line is physical therapy. And ultimately, we are physical therapists treating patients. And you may go into a clinic and they may have every bell and whistle. When you're walking into our clinics, they're not 5, 6, 7, 8,000 square feet. Yes, we've got a flagship clinic that's close to 11,000 square feet, but it's been there for 21 years. And I've worked in pro sports for 35 years. So, that clinic has a little bit different of a vibe. But if you look at our normal clinics in the catchment areas that we're in, you can't pay big rents. You can't be on the hottest block. You can't spend money, gazillion dollars on signage. You have to be able to work your efficiencies based on your reimbursement. We have to pay our clinician. Not about a special treadmill, not about a special machine. It's about who's treating the patient. That's what the patients want. They want to be cared for by a physical therapist. And the best way you make it in our market right now is stop worrying about the size of your clinic, the size of your sign, the toys you have in the clinic. Understand the education you have in your mind, how good a physical therapist that you have, you're keeping, you're retaining, you're developing, you're continually educating. We do over 10 CEU programs a year, plus we offer probably the highest level of CEU reimbursement across the country because we want our therapists to be the tool. We don't want special bells and whistles. And if you cut down all those costs, then when you look at the difference of a $95 reimbursement and a $135 reimbursement, well, yeah, I don't have a $60,000 treadmill. I have a $5,000 treadmill that's probably going to last me 10 years, and I'm going to be reimbursed therapeutic exercise for the same amount of money. Yeah. So, there's a lot to be said. We're the profession. Physical therapists are the people treating. We need to take that back. I got to get in the academics' heads. We've got to be the people treating. It's not about the modalities. We need to understand how to use the modalities, but we are the treating force. We know the biomechanics. We know how to motivate someone. We know how to get psychosocially into their mind to get them to do things that they don't want to do because of pain or swelling. We know all of this. Let's get them doing it. Treat the patients with physical therapists, not with all the bells and whistles. And when you go back to the efficiency model, that's how we're doing it.
100%. I couldn't agree more. It's funny. I got a little feedback. I got a little, I guess you could say, criticism from my wife last night. I was in the kitchen, and with Meg Academy, we're a learning management system. And our learning management system really strongly leans toward the soft personnel management skills. I can teach you the 64 key statistics. I can teach you the stat grids. I can teach you the right schedule. I can teach you the appropriate coding. I don't believe physical therapists have anything to do with billing. I believe they treat a patient, they write a note for a patient, and they represent the codes for what they did in that session. And it's the volume of care, which is the second reason why you went to PT school, give the greatest abundance of care with each and every engagement. So of course, you should have as many units as you can put down because you gave as much care as you can. Because honestly, now I'm getting on a tangent. Honestly, if a patient comes in and sees John on a Wednesday and he delivers 2 units of care and I got a $40 copay, and then they come see me on a Friday and I deliver 4 units of care and they give a $40 copay, they're going to want to schedule with me. So that's what it's all about, people. It's not about we want to buy a bigger boat, let's put down more units. I don't care. No physical therapist has anything to do with billing, but it represents the ability that you have to give more care to your patient. And this is where I was going. My wife kind of criticized me yesterday. I do coaching calls with all of our members. I provide free coaching, 15, 20-minute sessions, as much as you want, every week if you want, whenever you want. So one of our clients, I don't know, Arkansas, Nebraska, somewhere in the Midwest, called and had a coaching session set up with me. I was on the phone for like 35, 40 minutes. And my wife is like, hearing me talk with the client. She's like, well, that's so much for that 15-minute coaching call. And I said, you know what, honey? That's why they love That's why they love Meg Academy, because I go above and beyond whenever it's called for. That call required me to go into greater depth for them. And I don't care about it. It's free. I don't check. And John, that's what you're saying. As a clinician, let me just give, and John, you tell me what you think about this. For decades, it used to be, and I don't know for you new grads listening or for you staff therapists listening, I don't know if you even realize this, but when you take a position, and if John were to hire you, I were to hire you, and I'm going to pay you $90,000 a year to work for me. For decades, we've always known you have to be put on a schedule given the resources to generate 4 times that 90. You got to generate 4 times that back. 1 multiple goes to you. 1 multiple goes to taxes and insurance. 1 multiple goes back to running the practice and overhead. And the last multiple gets split between the owner and management and reserve accounts to forward the business forward, right? That's called keystone pricing. It's been industry standard forever. Now in physical therapy, you know what? John and I, running practices, we're struggling to get a 3.5, struggling. I mean, you got to know, guys, when you take your first position with John, John's agreeing to give you most likely 6 paid holidays, 2 weeks off. So there's 3 weeks right there that he's paying for that there's 0 coming back in exchange. So for you guys to come in here and be like, oh, but I don't want to do my 55 to 65 visits a week. I'm more comfortable with 40, 30, 40. What? Like what? What are you talking about?
And they don't understand the math. The biggest problem is the academic institution should have, and I believe it should be in the core curriculum. It should be a full semester core curriculum educating the physical therapist on the business and operations of physical therapy in our country. And although I'm going into colleges and doing a 2-hour lecture once a year, I believe it should be a full semester class. You have it in medical school, you have it in chiropractic school. Why don't we have it in physical therapy school?
Dentistry, vet school, right. Dentistry. I mean, it's just standard. So you get these people, you understand these struggles. You have the 2-way street, just like we coach it too. I really believe, and I don't want to speak for you, but I believe when you said we invest, our practice motto is we invest in the individuals who work with us, both personally and professionally, for the benefit of our patients and our practice. When you get people to see that is the goal, that they're growing personally, they're growing professionally for the benefit of the patients and the practice, not just me. I'm not just trying to be TO and it's all about me. It's all about all 4 of those parties. How you've pulled that off has been through you said mentorship program. And to me, for those of you listening, if you don't have, I believe the mentorship program should start at high school. I believe it should start at your tech level. If you employ techs, you should be mentoring them. It's for those who are interested in going to PT school. Put them on a PT track inside your practice while they're in your practice as a tech.
Build that culture. That's what it's got to be. And it's got to be a culture that they understand the industry. It's not just giving. They've got to understand the industry and what they're jumping into. And that's one of the biggest things. I still do a tremendous amount of coaching with our senior leader, clinical directors, our regional directors, and I'm doing education just to keep them building and understanding that if I'm still doing it, you've got to do it, because we've got to keep that culture going throughout the company. And You're seeing companies across the company, the very, very large companies are having massive issues because they took on too much to eat and they can't digest it. And then you've got the smaller companies. I mean, you've got kids coming. I mean, this amazes me. You've got students graduating and within the first 2 years, and realize you said $149,000 worth of debt. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say you've got $100,000 worth of debt, but within 2 years of practice, you want to open your own clinic because you want to be an entrepreneur. I fully support that. But what are you looking to open? You can't open 5,000 square feet and spend $500,000 on equipment. If I'm doing it after 21 years and I'm only taking 1,500 square feet and only spending $75,000, how can you possibly say I'm going to open up a 5,000 square foot space and spend $500,000? And oh yeah, I'm still paying off my student loan of $100,000. You need to understand the math. And that's the part. I mean, we had, and this is so fresh. Last week, I had an owner in Brooklyn and an owner in South Jersey call me up. And I'm telling you this because it's so factual. Both of them, one was 4,000 square feet, one was 5,000 square feet. First of all, do you know how expensive 5,000 square feet in Brooklyn, New York is? You're talking about a $225,000 a year lease. Think about what I just told you, a $225,000 a year lease that
And
you
John,
took.
John, let me just, by our standards, when I coach practice owners, I say your lease needs to be less than 10% of your yearly GI. You got 225,000.
100%. And I'm sitting there and I'm having the conversation, and one of my team was with me and they're like, John, please don't insult the person. And I'm like, I said, I got to ask you a question. You had $100,000 worth of student debt. How did you think you're not in network? Nobody knows you. You haven't built your catchment area. How did you think you were going to pay the $225,000 a year? But better yet, how are you going to pay off the $300,000 worth of equipment? And real quick, it's like, hey, can you assume our lease and buy our equipment and I'll come work for you? And ultimately, if you would have did it in the reverse, and you came out and realized that we had a pathway for you to build your own office and not spend the money and not put it on you and generating capital every year, it's still your office. Yes, you might be doing it under the JAG title, but it's still your office. You're doing the same thing. You're just not burying yourself in debt. I mean, it's just, people have to understand, and listen, it's an American problem. It's not just a physical therapy problem, but debt doesn't go away. You got to understand, if you're
What
taking
do you mean?
it,
What is that true?
Unless you're one of the 10 people a year that win Mega Millions, you're not getting rid of your debt. We're 360 million people in the United States of America. If you're taking on more than you're making, it doesn't go away. And by the way, investing in the Mega Millions is adding to your debt. So you've got to really understand. And listen, I've got two kids. They're separated by 9 years. I have a 28-year-old and a 19-year-old, and it's amazing to get their thoughts about finances. The 28-year-old doesn't spend a dime. She has no problem asking me for a buck. But then the 19-year-old has no problem just spending the money because he thinks there's a tree in the backyard. We need to teach from the high school level, the collegiate level. We have to teach how to balance your own checkbook and understand, just because somebody wants to give you debt at 17, 19% interest, that's not a good deal.
Oh, that is such a good segue to wrap this up. We've spoken a lot on this about the new grad, the staff therapist, how to properly set your expectations, so that, because we want you to win. We want you to come out of PT school, get the ideal job, seek the opportunity of growth and expansion personally and professionally. We've touched on that. Let's talk about the practice owners. Let's give some tips. Let's give some metrics. Let's give a little bit of meat and potatoes. You're in a challenging part of the country and you're succeeding. And it's because you're paying attention to some metrics. It's because you're paying attention to some key points of fact. So I'm going to share some world wisdom. I'm going to share some pearls of wisdom, I guess, that we utilize to enable our staff, our practice owners, to succeed in New Jersey, in New York, in Connecticut, in Eastern Pennsylvania, and throughout the United States. We're national. One of the metrics is what we just said. Your rent needs to be less than 10% of your GI. So for people listening, jot that one down. The next metric is if you're opening a private practice in today's world, I like to see people open between 1,500 and 2,500 square foot spaces. In different parts of the country, rural, you can go as low as 1,200 square feet, but you're going to be busting out of your seams once you get to 1,000 square foot office. Not my favorite sweet spot. My sweet spot's like around 18 to 2,200 square feet. So that's the second pearl of wisdom. Third, the average reimbursement in the United States right now is about $85 a visit. In other areas, I've been in upstate New York where people have said my average reimbursement is $63. So we know what that is. What you need to drive at right now is to create a schedule and create a practice culture that you can generate a 3.5 multiple per clinician. You have to get a 3 multiple per clinic, whatever you're paying them. Now, you're going to have to educate them that they have to participate in your team on that 3.5 multiple. My last key statistic, which a lot of people do not know this number, and I'm going to give this out, it's GI divided by staff. GI divided by staff. I take my total staff, I take my total revenue, I got my FTEs per month, I got my revenue per month, and I divide those two out. What that basically gives me is a number, and that number tells me how big the bag of money is that each individual is contributing to putting into the business on a weekly basis. Okay. So I on a monthly basis rather. So I look at my monthly GI divided by my total FTEs, and I want to see like how much money, actually we look at the monthly GI, we break it down per week, honestly. And if you're above $1,500 per week per FTE for that office, you're good. If you're above 2,500, you're excellent. Have I ever seen anybody over 3,000? Never. But if you're under 1,500, it's really a little bit of a mayday kind of thing. So 1,500 to 2,000 is fair. 2,000 to 2,500 is good. Over 2,500 is stupendous. So that's where we're trying to look at how much money is coming in when you look at your total GI divided by staff and break that down on a weekly basis. So there's some good key metrics that we look at to tell us if we have a healthy operating practice or not. John, there's got to be certain things that you're looking at as well. Maybe just 1, 2, or 3 things. Doesn't have to be many that people need to be mindful of. So they know
one of the biggest things is, especially as a practice owner, is retention, and outcomes. You have to be able to look at the outcomes. What are the insurance companies? What are the pathways that you're trying to get a positive outcome based on diagnoses and treatment, and understand the retention of patients based on a new evaluation? It's very, very important that you're not letting patients fall by the wayside, not fully recuperated and not meeting the expectations of what the insurance company may be dictating. And listen, if you're working also in the workman's comp world and you're working with case managers, your relationship with those case managers are very important, and your success of your business is based on the outcomes you're getting with diagnoses that these case managers see.
True.
So
True.
we have our clinical directors in tune with the retention of patients, but also the collaboration with the case managers on certain workman's comp, and we do see workman's comp in all of our clinics. So I think it's very important. I think the other thing to point out at any practice owner is listen, I might have bashed the concept of investment, but if you want to own your own place, I fully support it. I did it, and you should be able to do it. I was very fortunate recently to publish a book called The JAG Method. Ultimately, everybody says, well, who did you write this book for? It's only 30 pages. Well, the book was actually 135 pages. It was some of the most boring stuff you ever read. But ultimately, it was putting together different things, that there are no such things as obstacles. When you look at a hurdle in a track meet, it's made to go through, over, or around. It's made to fall. It's made to break. We've got to understand that nothing should stop us. And if your goal is ownership, great. But understand there's pathways of ownership, and you have to understand the numbers. So the book was actually consolidated down to 30 pages because the concept was a page a minute a chapter. You're in and out in 25 to 30 minutes. And the goal was to give you that kick in the butt to achieve any goal. That goal could be graduation. That goal could be opening your own business. That goal could be meeting a new doctor, meeting a new community. Whatever it is, nobody should ever tell you no. It's your path. Build your path and go for it. And whatever path you're going on, stay on it. You may have to deviate every now and then, but achieve your goals. And this book was so exciting to me that I took the 135 page of boredom and basically gave you a shot and a kick in the butt to say, go after what's yours and go after your path. And I'm so proud of it that we actually broke Amazon in the first 2 weeks. We were so proud they had to shut the button off. But ultimately, we've got entrepreneur schools using it, physical therapy schools, occupational therapy schools, and ultimately it's geared towards in and out, but a little kick in the butt to say nobody should tell you no.
John, you're so right. And it's so passionate. And what I'm wanting people to walk away from this is when you hear John and I speak, and hopefully you can connect with what we're saying, it's about mindset. Above everything else, it's your mindset. Once you set your mind on something, you go all in. You know, I was just speaking with a practice owner this morning who's like, Brian, I've been listening to you since 2019. I've been to the national conventions. I've been to your talks. I've been on your website. I'm finally ready to make a change and get the training I need to be a better CEO, because I realized I only became a clinician through PT school, but no one ever gave me the tools to succeed in practice. And I said, well, how long have you been open? He's like, a year. I said, how many visits are you doing? He's like, 80. I'm like, well, a 3,000 square foot office doing 80 visits a week, you should have done that at 6 months. And I love this guy. He's a super nice guy. And I said, look, at the end of the call, I said, look, assume you don't enroll with us and get the training you need to put the CEO hat on your head and get all the metrics and all the templates and all the stuff. What are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do? If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you've got. And that's the final message on this podcast I want to leave you all with. John is saying the training is available. The knowledge is there. The experience is there for you to get it, but you have to reach for it. You can align with JAG physical therapy. You can become an employee, work up the employment ladder. You can become a practice owner. You can get set up. There's so many variables that they can afford you to really expand yourself, really expand your beingness in the professional physical therapy. And for you to hear it from someone who's doing it in the most challenging part of the country, I think adds tremendous value to this message. Of course, we're always here to support you and give you the support you need, whether that be with billing, virtual, whatever it is. I'm not here to sell products or anything like that. I'm here to give you training, here to give you the knowledge, the tools, the enlightenment, the ability for you to apply yourself at a level that you've not otherwise done. So, John, again, thank you so much for your time. The book is great. We'll put the links in the podcast below so people can get to the book. Hopefully we can get an Amazon link on there for you. This is all about paying it forward. PTs helping PTs. John and I are just simply, when you boil it all down, we're PTs wanting to help you, whether you're an intrapreneur, a staff therapist, or it's an employment. You want to be an employer and you have that vision. Let us help you live that dream. That's it for me, everybody. John, again, thank you so much. You've shared such great material. I hope I've done you justice and given you enough of the floor to really share what you know.
Brian, this was awesome. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. So that's it, everybody. As always, start each and every day expecting to do well. It's all about mindset. Take care. Until next week.